Have you ever looked back on a single moment and realized it changed everything? A kind word, a helping hand, a spark of hope when life felt heavy? In a quiet corner of Willow Creek, a small town nestled in the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, where the scent of fresh-baked bread still drifts from the corner bakery and the church bells ring every Sunday, a story unfolded that reminded a community what truly matters. It's a story about Margaret Thompson, a 72-year-old widow with laugh lines etched deep from a life well lived, and a young man named Daniel, whose paths crossed in a way neither expected. Their tale is one of resilience, kindness, and the wisdom that only time can bring, a story that might just stir memories of your own. Margaret's days began with the soft creak of her porch swing, where she'd sip coffee and watch the world wake up on Maple Street. The town square, with its cobblestone paths and flower baskets swaying in the breeze, felt like an old friend. But lately the square had grown quieter. The community center, once the heart of Willow Creek, faced closure due to funding cuts. Margaret, who'd spent decades organizing potlucks and book clubs there, felt the weight of its loss. It wasn't just a building, it was where she'd laughed with friends, mourned her husband, and found purpose after his passing. The thought of it shuddered, its windows dark, tugged at her heart. She wasn't alone in her worry. Neighbors whispered about it at the diner, their voices tinged with resignation. "Times change," they'd say. But Margaret wasn't ready to let go. Enter Daniel, a 28-year-old barista at the local coffee shop, who'd moved to Willow Creek to escape the noise of Philadelphia. With his quick smile and knack for remembering everyone's order, he'd become a fixture in town. But Daniel carried a quiet burden, a strained relationship with his father, who'd left when he was a boy. He'd come to Willow Creek searching for a fresh start, but the past clung to him like the autumn leaves underfoot. Margaret noticed him at the center's final book club meeting, where he lingered in the back, flipping through a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. She saw something in his eyes, a flicker of longing, maybe for connection, maybe for something he couldn't name. "You look like you've got a story to tell," she said, her voice warm but direct. Daniel just shrugged, but the seed of a bond was planted. The dilemma grew sharper when the town council announced the center's closure was imminent unless $20,000 could be raised in a month. Margaret, with her decades of organizing, rallied a small group of volunteers, retirees like her, full of grit and memories of better days. They planned a fundraiser, a talent show to draw the town together. But challenges piled up fast. The local paper barely covered the story, and younger folks, glued to their phones, seemed indifferent. Margaret's arthritis flared, making every flyer she hung a small battle. And then there was Daniel, who'd volunteered to help but struggled to connect with the older volunteers, their references to rotary phones and Johnny Cash lost on him. The generational gap felt like a chasm, and Margaret sensed his frustration. "I don't know if I belong here," he admitted one evening, stacking chairs after a planning meeting. Margaret, wiping down tables, paused. "Belonging takes time, Daniel, but you're here and that's a start." The tension thickened as the fundraiser approached. Margaret uncovered an old box of photos in the center's storage room, snapshots of dances, weddings, and veterans' breakfasts held there over decades. One photo stopped her cold, a young man, maybe 30, laughing with a group of veterans. It was Daniel's father, Tom, from years before he'd left his family. Margaret's heart sank. She'd known Tom, had even danced with him at a center event. The realization hit her. Daniel's reluctance wasn't just shyness. It was tied to a past he hadn't shared. She wondered if showing him the photo would heal or hurt, but she tucked it away, unsure. Meanwhile, Daniel faced his own hurdle. His boss at the coffee shop, skeptical of the fundraiser's odds, cut his shifts, leaving him scrambling to pay rent. The center's fate seemed to mirror his own, a fight against fading hope. Then came the twist. At a planning meeting, Margaret overheard a heated exchange between two volunteers about a forgotten grant application buried in the center's files from years ago. It was a long shot, but if they could resubmit it, the state might cover half the needed funds. The catch? The deadline was days away, and the paperwork required details only the oldest residents might recall. Details about the center's history, its impact, its heart. Margaret took charge, her voice steady but her hands trembling as she dialed old friends, piecing together stories of the center's past. Daniel, watching her determination, felt a shift. He offered to digitize the application, his tech skills bridging a gap the older volunteers couldn't. "You're a lifesaver," Margaret told him, and for the first time, Daniel felt he belonged. Our first act of kindness came quietly. Daniel, noticing Margaret's wince as she carried a box of decorations, took it from her without a word. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said, his tone soft but firm. Margaret smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Takes one to know one." That moment sparked something. Daniel started showing up early, brewing coffee for the volunteers, listening to their stories of Willow Creek's past, stories of resilience through recessions, wars, and change. Their wisdom, shared over cups of decaf, began to chip away at his walls. He saw his own struggles in their tales of loss and renewal, and it gave him courage. The second act of kindness was Margaret's. She invited Daniel to her home for dinner, a simple meal of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the kind of comfort food that carried the warmth of memory. Over dinner, she shared the photo of his father. "He wasn't perfect, Daniel, but he was part of this town's heart. So are you." Daniel's eyes glistened as he held the photo, the weight of his past easing just a fraction. Margaret didn't push. She just listened, her presence a quiet anchor. That night, Daniel wrote a letter to his father, not to send, but to let go. It was a step toward healing, one Margaret's kindness had made possible. The third act came from the community itself. At the talent show, the town turned out in droves. Retirees sang folk songs, kids danced, and Daniel, in a moment of bravery, read a poem he'd written about second chances. The crowd's applause warmed him like the summer sun. Margaret, watching from the wings, felt a swell of pride. The grant application, submitted just in time, won partial funding, and the talent show raised the rest. The center was saved. But more than that, connections were reborn. Neighbors who drifted apart swapped stories, laughed, and planned new events. Daniel found a mentor in Margaret, and she found a friend who reminded her that purpose doesn't fade with age. As the climax unfolded, Margaret stood on the center's stage, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "This place," she said, "holds our stories, our joys, our sorrows, our strength. Tonight we proved it's never too late to fight for what matters." She looked at Daniel, who nodded, his eyes bright. The crowd cheered, their voices a chorus of shared history. "Does this remind you of a time when community meant everything? When a single act of kindness changed your day or your life?" The resolution wasn't perfect. The center needed ongoing support, and Margaret's arthritis wouldn't vanish. Daniel still wrestled with his past, but he'd found a place to belong. The story closed with them on Margaret's porch swing, the air thick with the scent of honeysuckle. "You think we'll keep this going?" Daniel asked. Margaret chuckled. "As long as we've got each other, we'll manage." It was a quiet promise, one that left room for life's ongoing journey, a journey of hope, resilience, and connection. If this story touched your heart, share a moment of kindness from your own life in the comments below. Your stories inspire us all. Subscribe for more tales of hope and connection, and check out our next video about a community that rebuilt after loss. It's a story you won't want to miss. Life, at any age, is a tapestry of moments. Some heavy, some light, but all woven together by kindness. Here's to the wisdom we carry, the hope we share, and the stories still to come.